And welcome back, everyone, to the Pokemon Team Creation Series. Today's video comes to us from CJM, longtime viewer, who asked the question, what is the Pokemon team of Roronoa Zoro from One Piece? I assume you meant this Zoro and not the original Zoro, but if you did mean the actual Zoro, Antonio Banderas, swashbuckling kind of guy, let me know if that's what you meant, and I'll just put it back on the list, and next time I cycle through the names, I'll get to that Zoro as well. But Zoro is the swordsman of the Straw Hat Pirates. He is a master swordsman, master of the three-sword style. Doing a team for him was both relatively simple, but proved to be a little tricky as well. So let's get two of these Mon right out of the way. Swordsman is going to have sword-based Pokemon. Particularly someone who uses three swords is going to have both a Doublade and a Honedge, I think. Now, why not Aegislash? I think the reason for that is very simple. It's because Aegislash, while a giant living sword, is also a shield simultaneously. Now, you may say, well, wait, what about when I get to another Mon on this team? But there's a different reason for the other Mon on the team. Aegislash, because Zoro, while good defensively with the swords, doesn't pry defense. Stance change doesn't work with Aegislash. Sorry, it doesn't work with Zoro. Whereas no guard works perfectly fine for these guys' abilities. And in total, 3 swords means this makes sense. I also could have gone the other route of giving him 3 different Honedges. However, that I felt would not have been the best route to go. So this makes sense to me. A 3-sword style user would have a Honedge and a Doublade, or 3 Honedges in general. Now, that being said, however, there are other Mon on the team, clearly. And one of the things that I knew I had to do was branch away from swordsmanship, at least in one Mon. The entire team can't be sword-based, which, to be fair, there aren't a lot of sword-based Pokemon to begin with. In fact, the relative total amount of them are on this team, give or take. So with that being said, one of the few things that he's very well known for is a poor sense of direction. And so what kind of Mon would you give a guy that has a poor sense of direction? Is there any Pokemon that has a poor sense of direction itself? Not really. Not that I could find anyway. But what would you give someone who has a poor sense of direction? You give them a compass. And luckily, Nosepass, while also based off an Easter Island head as well, is also partly based off a compass as well. Because it points, I believe, due north, they say. It always does that. It's got its electromagnetic abilities that allow it to point in the direction it needs to go. Or to point in the direction that it's supposed to be pointing at north, I believe. Ironically, based on the amount of electric moves this Mon's line can learn, I am shocked it's not part electric as well. Because I was looking up, going through the list of how well this team would do in certain regions. I was actually a little shocked how many electric moves this Mon can learn. I always kind of like Nosepass. It's a very weird looking Mon, but it's a Mon that looks like a Mon. It also looks like it literally does have a giant nose with the big nostrils, just ha-cha-cha-cha. But yeah, that's the kind of Mon I would give a guy who's got a poor sense of direction. Usually he's like, where the hell am I? Nosepass. Where are we going? No. Well, there's north. They said go west, so that's west, and he goes east. So even with Nosepass, I think he'd still end up getting lost a lot of the time. One of the other things, though, that he is known for is being able to create arcing slashes of wind with his sheer physicality alone and his blades. So I wanted a Mon that could learn the move Air Cutter. Not Air Slash. I wanted Air Cutter because he used multiple at the same time. And that's what Air Cutter is. Air Slash is like one single strike. Air Cutter is multiple strikes. Ultimately, what I found was the Mon that I think fit the bill on this was Scyther. Now, I did not go Scizor. I want to be very clear about that. I did not go Scizor. And because Scizor, while technically a better Pokemon, better defense, all that, its stats are actually the same. But while still a better typing with Steel and Bug, it's times 4 weak to fire, admittedly, but it now gains a few immunity to poison, which, honestly, I'll take the immunity to poison over the immunity to ground, quite frankly. But to be fair, being Steel also makes you weak to ground, so it's a good trade-off, I think. You have better defense and attack on Scizor, if I'm not mistaken, but Scyther's got better speed overall. At least if I remember that correctly. But Scyther, having 2 giant scythe blades for arms, just swords more or less, sickle blades, makes sense. It can learn the move Sword Dance, so again, it makes sense for that this would be a Mon to be on Zoro's team. Now, you might be saying, well, if you're not going to do Aegislash, why are you doing Surfetch down here? It's a good question, honestly. I think one of the reasons is Galarian Farfetch's story is, not story, but lore, works a little well with Zoro, trying to be the best swordsman there is, eventually evolving after getting 3 critical hits in a fight. It's capable of breaking through. It has a move called Meteor Assault, which technically translates to Zoro as someone who can slice a giant meteor, which technically it wasn't a meteor, it was just a giant boulder, but still something he can do as a fighting type that Zoro can do as well. Overall, and when it's said that when their leaks finally, die or, wither away, they stop fighting. I imagine if he lost his swords, eventually he would stop fighting Zoro, but we probably will never know that for certain. Would he find new swords? Maybe as well. Regardless, it's one of the only other sword Pokemon out there. Speaking of which, there is the sword Pokemon, Zacian, which that one had to kind of be a given because it literally fights with a sword in its mouth, very much like Zoro does. Add on to the fact that yes, it is the Pokemon sword Pokemon. I don't think that's actually its moniker, is it? I didn't actually look to see if that's what it's legitimately referred to as their shield and sword Pokemon. I think that is what they are referred to, respectively. Zamazenta is the shield Pokemon, whereas Zacian is the sword Pokemon. But I'm about to check that right now, so hold your horses real quick. Not that it's a big deal. I think it's just interesting to say the least. It's actually called the warrior Pokemon. So there you go. It's not the sword Pokemon, which it would be called the sword Pokemon. Though, maybe that's actually Honedge. Now that I think about it, maybe that's what Honedge is referred to. Let me just see here now. It does occur to me, too, as we get more and more Mon, the species classification. I can't recall if some Mon share the same species classification as others, or if every one of them is different. That means Game Freak, every time they do a new Pokemon, has to think of a different species name as well. Yes, the sword Pokemon is actually Honedge. That wouldn't make sense. It's a living sword. Still, Zacian makes 100% sense. It is insanely powerful. It actually was broken during its day, and then it got nerfed a little bit. But overall, yeah, that is the team I would choose for Zoro. Now, the 2 questions that are always asked at the end of these videos. How balanced is the team, and how well would this team do in any of the game franchises? And could he become champion in any of these regions? Well, this team is not the most balanced. It's got 6 specific weaknesses, 2 to Dark with both the Ghost Steel types, 2 to Ghost with both the Ghost Steel types, 2 to Steel with Zamazenta not having any special resistance to Steel and Surfetch being a fighting type, 2 weaknesses to Fighting with both, again, Surfetch and Scyther being a bug type. And here's where it's the real kicker for a lot of these, the gym challenge for this team would be 4 weaknesses to Fire, because you have both the bug type with no special resistance, bug flying, a Fairy Steel type, and Fairy has no resistance to Fire whatsoever. In fact, Fire is actually resistant to Fairy. And the 2 Steel Ghost types. 2/3 of this team is weak to Fire, and 2/3 of this team is weak to Ground, because Steel is weak to ground, which means you have Nosepass getting its teeth kicked in by ground types. The 2 Honedges don't have Levitate. If they had Levitate, that would make them a lot more broken, honestly, because that would mean you'd have 4 immunities. You'd have immunity to ground, poison, normal, and fighting. That would be kind of broken. But regardless, yeah, they're not weak. They're not immune to ground. They're weak to ground. And Zacian, again, being a Steel Fairy type, is weak to ground. I also treated it as such. As always, Honedge to Nosepass to Scyther to Doublade to Surfetch to Zacian is the order in which the team would be created. So in Kanto, surprisingly, you don't run into any problems. Brock would be really quick because Honedge can learn Shadow Sneak early. Pass has enough durability to take a hit or two from Misty, and it has electric attacks, which are going to be a boon to it. And Starmie's a psychic type, so Hone Edge will be able to deal with it. By the time you get to Lieutenant Surge, Scyther is already going to be much more capable of helping out in that scenario. Granted, its flying type still gives it a weakness to electricity, but still. Regardless, Hone Edge is... You might not be able to get Hone Edge officially at that point because Erica's team's not quite at that level. But even if you don't have it, you actually should still be able to beat Erica, grass types with Scyther and Hone Edge, being resistant to steel and Bug being strong against grass. Then if you have Doublade and Surf Edge, by the time you get to Koga, it's no problem. And then you have Zamazenta. At that point, it's no big issue. Unfortunately, you run into not one, but two big roadblocks. Because you have Blaine and Giovanni directly after those guys. And they're both not just type strong against this team, but the two quad weakness, the 4 types that 2/3 of your team are weak against. Against Blaine, the only mon you have on the team that aren't going to be taken down pretty quick are Surfetch, Nosepass, and arguably Zacian because it's a legendary. But even then, it's not going to have enough, it's maybe going to be able to take out a mon. But it would still go down. And then Giovanni, you again have it, but in a different way. Now it's Scyther and Surfetch are your only mon that really have any strength against that team. And he does have a Rhydon, I think he has 2 Rhyhorns, but then he has Kangaskhan, Nidoqueen, and Nido King. And those mon are not going to be able to be doing, those mon, your Surfetch won't be able to do much against. Particularly the Poison type's going to resist the fighting. And Scyther's, while having flying isn't actually strong against ground. It's immune to ground, but it's not actually a strength against the ground. If you somehow even manage to get past them, and that's a kind of a big if, you still got to go through the Elite Four, which the only one you will have a strong problem with is Lance. Why is that when you have a Fairy Steel type on the team? Well, that Fairy Steel type will just not, because you got to keep it relative to the level of your opponent, these mon, you can't really over level that much. You don't, looking at, here's the problem with Zacian I found. And this is a problem with Zacian, it is. Zacian doesn't actually learn any strong fairy moves. Except for Moonblast, I think. Where'd you go? Come on, seriously, where is Zacian here? I'm on Ghost, that's why. 1 second, and let me just recheck that so I know I'm not going insane here. If I remember correctly, Zacian does not learn many fairy moves, if at all. And even the fairy moves it can learn, it really wouldn't learn until later, so late down the road that it wouldn't be at a level. You're going to be over leveled to fight any of these guys. So 1 second, Zacian's moveset at the moment. Yeah. You know what it can learn? You know the only fairy type move that Zacian can learn? It's Moonblast. And it's naturally, mind you, naturally it can learn it. But actually, and this is the screwed up part there, it can learn Dazzling Gleam, Play Rough, Misty Terrain. Those are it. For a Fairy Steel type, it can only learn 4 fairy moves. Only one of them is natural. And one of them is just setting up terrain. Granted, this is by Gen 9 listing, so maybe in Gen 8 it had a different move pool. But, yeah, that's a problem when you're a fairy type against dragon Pokemon. Now, this does, however, mean that Lance won't be able to hit it with any dragon type moves, but the counter-argument to that is Gen 1 didn't give it any dragon type moves. So, yeah, you couldn't get past Lance probably with this. I mean, Zacian's going to put in some work and be resistant to some moves, but overall, it's still going to be going down, I think. And that's even assuming you're able to get past Blaine and Giovanni, which I don't think you can. So you can't be the champion of Kanto. When it comes to Johto, honestly, you actually have a pretty clean run with this region. You should be able to get past Faulkner, and actually, you should be able to get past, no joke, you should be able to get past Faulkner, Bugsy, Whitney, Morty, Chuck, Jasmine, and Price, all without any relative difficulty. Claire's one that you will have a little bit of a problem with. Again, if you had more actual fairy type moves at the level that you're fighting them at, it wouldn't be as bad. And she's the one you're going to struggle with a lot. But because Zacian is still a legendary, I think you should be fine. But when it comes to Elite Four, once again, you're stuck at Lance. Even if you can get past all of the other ones, which I think you can. Lance now has a much more developed team come the Johto games, particularly Soul Silver and Heart Gold. So, and has things like a Charizard on the team, which is going to completely take down two-thirds of your team. So, yeah, I think you can be the champion of Johto, but it is not going to be easy. But I think you can do it. I also think you can be the champion of Hoenn, but the problem with that is you have to get past one major opponent. And I legitimately don't think you can. Flannery. For I think the second time in a row, Flannery has proven to be the biggest problem for this team. Or Fire-type gym leader for a team. Because she's a Fire-type user. And at the order we've gone in, you would have a Honedge who's not fully evolved, so it has low stats, so it's going to go down pretty quick to a solid Fire-type move. You've got one resistant Mon to fire, but it's super slow, which means it's going to be taking a lot of hits before it takes anything down. Scyther's fast, but has a direct weakness to fire. And Doublade, which would be a little over-leveled at this point, is still going to be... It's not going to be able to take Torkoal down in one hit. So, yeah, I'm going to be honest... While you could beat all the other gyms, you would struggle a little bit with Juan or Wallace. And Steven, because even though he's got Rock and Steel types, which you do have like Surfetch for that, Surfetch is kind of the only thing you have for that. Although Zacian can learn fighting type moves, so it does balance out. The problem is all of his types are dual types. A couple of them are quad weak to fighting, but others like straight up resist it, like Claydol, Metagross strays out, resists fighting thanks to the psychic typing, and then it's going to kind of go to town. So Steven is not an easy challenge to be dealing with. And honestly, you might not even get to Steven because of Drake. Your Dragon immunity with Zacian doesn't mean jack shit against Drake's team because his team has really good coverage, particularly the Earthquake on those Flygons. So, if hypothetically you could get past Flannery, which I actually don't think you can, maybe you could be the champion of Hoenn, but I really don't think you could. I actually don't think you could become champion of Hoenn. Then you get into Sinnoh, and again, really, you're actually running into a problem right at the gate. Because even in the original Diamond and Pearl games with Sinnoh, you got to deal with Rourke, who has 4 rock type on the team. And while you do have Shadow Sneak on your Honedge, it's not like it's a strong move. It's not like it's a stabs type resistant move. Well, it's a stab, but it's not like it's a super effective move against them. And that Cranidos, that thing hits hard, even for that level. Cranidos has nuts attack stat. I've used it on occasions. I love Cranidos, actually. Cranidos is awesome. But yeah, I actually don't know if you could get past Rorik. Now, let's just play hypothetically. If you could, you'll actually have a relatively easy time throughout the rest of the region. Yes, the fighting type Gym Leader Mayleens could take care of Nosepass, no problem. Although Nosepass usually does have Sturdy with it. So you should be able to get a hit in no matter what. And hopefully you should be able to paralyze something with Thunder Wave. But all the other gym leaders shouldn't be that big of an issue. The problem comes in the Elite Four. Not even Cynthia, which I don't think you can handle Cynthia. It's the Elite Four because you deal with a ground type and a fire type user in the Elite Four. Now, granted, Flint only has 2 actual fire types on the team, but all of his Mon know fire type moves. And some of them have strong resistances. Like, for example, the Lopunny is immune to ghost type moves, so you can't use ghost type moves with Honedge or Doublade. You also can't... Now you have Driftbloom, who is weak to ghost, but then you also have... Oh, God, what was his other Mon? Lopunny, Rapidash, Fernape, Steelix. You also have Steelix, which the only Mons you really have on the team that can handle that are Surfetched and Zacian. But that, in playing, I'm talking about Flint, you have to still get past Bertha, who's a ground type user, and a strong one at that. I don't think you can get past Bertha. Remember, you can't be really over leveled. Maybe like 1 or 2 levels, sure. But you can't be overly leveled in these scenarios. So even on her team can take out legitimately 2/3 of your team. which would leave you only with Scyther and Surfetch. And while they could put in some work, I don't see them getting you the victory in this. So you can't be the champion of Sinnoh. You also honestly can't become the champion of Unova. Why? Well, to be honest, you're shit out of luck when it comes to Clay. The problem is Clay literally being a ground type user. By the time you get to Clay, you'll be at your 5th Mon Surfetched. He's got Scavenger is weak to Surfetch, yes, but he's also got Crookerrock and not Seismitoad, the one before that. I can't remember the name of it, but the one before that, if I remember correctly. But the point is, he has Mon that are going to be completely resisting a lot of your attacks, because most, like, Rock's not going to do much. Most of this Mon, none of these guys actually have any strength against ground. And then they're going to be throwing out moves that are really going to be hindering you. Scyther's got an advantage because it's immune to a lot of the ground, but they have moves other than ground to use. Clay is a problem. Other than that, your only big problem is going to be either Iris, which again, despite having a fairy type, you have no strength against, or Alder, who's just got too much variety on this team compared to it. 3 bugs, mind you, but it's a Scavalier, which has got insane defense and physical attack, and you have no fire moves on this team to do anything about that, which is a serious problem. A Selgor, which is faster than anything on this team, and then Volcarona, which can, again, wipe out 2/3 of this team. So, and then you got Vanillite, Vanillux, Draudigon, and Buffalon, all of which are going to be giving you their own problems. So, yeah, you can't be a Unova champion. You cannot be the champion. I'm going to speed through this because we're already at 20 minutes. You could maybe be the champion of Kalos. You can go through the gym leaders, no problem. Honestly, though, your problem's going to be 2 of the Elite 4 are Steel, which you really don't have any answers to on this team, except for 2 fighters, and then half his team is resistant to fighting. And then the fire type team, which again can just cleave through most of this team. The nose pass just can't do much. That once you get to Elite 4, it's too slow. It doesn't have the stats. So, but if you get to Diantha, you actually could beat her. And that's the irony here. Because Salucha can't do anything with Flying Press to your Hone Edge or Doublade. So it's not impossible. It is not impossible. But then you go into Galar, and right out the gate, once you hit Kobu, you're kind of screwed. Nose Pass is, like I said, it's too slow. It might get a hit in, but it's probably not even going to have the stats to take down any of his Mon. And both Hone Edge and Scyther just don't have the typing to be able to handle, any of his other Mon. Arcanine, Ninetales, or Centiskorch. Particularly the Centiskorch, which it hits fast and hard. So, yeah, you're not really going to be able to do anything against that team, and you're kind of just done. You can't pass that point. If by chance you did get past it, though, you still got to deal with B if you're playing Sword, and that's going to be problematic because B could go through at least a giant portion of your team. So can Alistair, actually, because even though they're fighting types, they also have other moves on there that can target the Hone Edge and the Doublade. And Alistair being a ghost type means he's going to take down those 2 pretty quick. Granted, the Doublade could get some work in taking 1 or 2 down, but still. And then you got to deal with Opal, and then there's no way you can beat Lance. Lance's Dragapult alone is going to be able to, because it has Flamethrower and it's faster than anything on the team, is going to cleave through the majority of this team fast. So, yeah, you can't be the champion of Galar, and you cannot be the champion of Paldea. The reason for this is actually very simple. You can actually get through all of the gym leaders without actually a lot of difficulty. Even Iona, who has 4 Mon on her team, is not all that difficult to deal with. You can outspeed most of what she's got. Hone Edge is resistant. Notice Paths should be able to take down, say, like the Kilowattrol and things along those lines. And then after that, you just add more Mon on the team. The problem for the team is really the Elite 4 because you are not getting past Rika. You can't get past that team. That ground team is way too powerful. Because while the gym leaders, when you look at their move pools on Cerebi, aren't the best, they're fun and all that, but they're not the strongest gym leaders around, really, because they don't have complete movesets. But particularly later on, once you get to, say, your 3rd gym, you should be going up against the people who have Mon that have 4 moves on their team. not waiting until the very last gym leader who only has one mon with 4 moves. But that gets made up very quickly by their Elite Four. Their Elite Four is legit. And it's legitimately taken multiple tries for people to get through those Elite Fours before. So, I like their Elite Four. They're a nice collection of characters. They're far better than, say, the champion is. So, yeah, you can't get past Rika. You would struggle even to get past Larry with his flying types. Was it Hansel or House? I can't remember his name. The dragon type Elite Four member. You'd struggle against him too. Believe it or not, you would actually struggle as well with Gita. Just, for example, once that King Gambit comes out, you have no good answer except for your fighting types. And you probably don't have your fighting types out at that point. Even then, King Gambit might be able to survive a strong enough strike from one to deal some serious damage. And then you still got to deal with some of her weird offset mon, like Go-Goat or, Veluza or something like that. Her team is just weird. It is very weird. Regardless, though, that is the team for Roro Zoro. I definitely think he could become the champion in some of the earlier regions, but not in a lot of the later ones. That's my thoughts, though. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.